Have you ever jumped into an opportunity and wished you hadn't? Or you got so excited about something that you went too fast? We're going to talk about two emotions that kind of feel like the same one that you might be inhibited by. Welcome to How to Get What You Want. This podcast is for driven women ready to claim their goals and navigate their careers with clarity and confidence. Join me as we explore real stories, tools, and strategies to help you steer your career exactly where you want to go. Let's get started on helping you get what you want. Hi, friends. Welcome. I'm Susie, and I'm so happy that you made the choice to join me today because this is an important topic that has gotten in my way in the past. I've really had to make intentional shifts to make sure that it still does not become something that impedes my decision-making. And I'm talking about these two emotions. I'm talking specifically about fear and excitement. I guarantee that these show up for you. And what's tricky about them is that they show up the same way. Sometimes for us, we can't identify one over the other. And so we create this phenomenon for ourselves that when we are excited about something, we buy in or we go too quick, too fast, and we might allow ourselves to overcommit. When we're faced with something that is fearful to us, we might say no before we're even ready to make that choice. And what's crazy about it is that what happens is the narrative that is associated with it. So these emotions look the same to the body, meaning we feel the same way. And you may have heard people's suggestion on when you're going to go do something like speaking in front of a group or you're presenting in front of a team of people that you don't know very well, you need to replace that feeling of fear with the idea that it's excitement, and that can work really well. And the other is also true with excitement. We get excited about something. Maybe we don't acknowledge that they were going to buy into what we were offering them. And so we feel so excited that we want to do more and we want to say, oh my gosh, well, not only this, I could do this or this or this. We might agree to do more than we even have time to do. And all of a sudden we get off that call or a little bit of time goes by and we're like, oh, why did we do that? Our excitement took over. And so it's important to realize that we interpret those emotions differently. There's some research, it's by Schachter and Singer, and it's a theory of emotion. And it's this idea that our physical response is the same, but our brains add a label based on the context. In fact, in 2013, Harvard studies showed that participants who reappraise anxiety as excitement for a big task actually performed better, spoke longer, and had more confidence, and they were seen by the audience as persuasive because that energy was recast as excitement. So that comes across, which is super interesting. And there's a study that revealed that emotion influences 90% of decision-making for executive levels. 90%, especially when it's uncertainty and pressure. And that is always around us. So 90% is emotion-based. It's really interesting. And we give so much clout to that intention or our gut feel. And that rationalizes that decision making. And neuroscience shows that high stakes moments, those times that are really important to us, our amygdala can override our prefrontal cortex, which means our amygdala is where our emotions are processed in our brain, but our prefrontal cortex is where we are very logical. So in those high stakes moments, the part of our brain that is driven through emotion is taking the driver's seat and our logic is taking a back seat. And so we rationalize that in the moment by those things we tell ourselves. We're not ready, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. I'm so excited. So you can see how that can get in our way. So fear says we're not ready. Excitement says we can deal with this. I can overpromise. Fear wants you to avoid the feedback because it feels too risky. But excitement says, I can get this done by the end of the week. And we all know that that is not always true. In reality, these emotions are making decisions for us that we don't want to live with later. And the more you identify when fear and excitement are a part of your everyday and what to do as you experience them, the more strategic you will be able to become in the way you make decisions for yourself in your professional life, in your personal life. Fear and excitement are introduced into our everyday, and we might not even realize them because we're looking for the drastic case of them when they show up in the biggest way for us. We think about a haunted house or somebody scaring us, and that's real fear. But fear is about facing a situation that we're not ready for. And excitement is the other, like we're going to be given a big surprise party, or we're going to go on a roller coaster. That's going to be excitement. But even in the line at the roller coaster can have both these sensations of fear and excitement. And you have to learn how to override one for the other if you want to not impede yourself from experience. So I'm going to give you a couple examples just to bring this to life in every day. I have a client. He had been asked by a senior team leader, not his direct leader, but somebody within the organization, to speak at their leadership summit. It's in front of more than 600 people. And by the way, a lot of his colleagues, his peers. When the senior leader approached him, he immediately said no. And what happened to him in his mind was, I don't have anything to say. My experience doesn't have this lens that's going to be helpful to the audience. I'm not a very good speaker. And so he said no. So we talked about it later, a few days after he had said no. And the realization to him about that was something he wanted to do for his future set. He wanted to learn to be a speaker on the stage. That just felt like a leap for him. But when we were talking about it and kind of unpacking it, he realized he could have said yes and then figured it out, gotten some coaching, gotten some experience, even had somebody help him write his script. But to be honest, it was too late. A few days had gone by. He did go back to the senior leader and say it was a mistake. He should have said yes. But that senior leader had already filled that position. The longer term effect was that perception that he said no was going to really stay with that senior leader. He was somebody that he wasn't going to naturally go to. Why would he want another no? Senior leadership, they look for people that are like, oh yeah, pick me. They want to go to people that are excited about opportunities. Just saying no in the moment was detrimental, not just for this situation, but for his brand within the company. And what I said to him was that fear isn't a stop sign. It's a signal to prepare and lean in. The second situation around, I worked for a startup and we were sitting in front of a potential client, which is always something that's really exciting for a startup. And this client started envisioning how our software could solve a problem that he was facing. And in my mind, I was like, oh, he's not understanding what's going on. And I need to stop this illusion, this thought process around how we could solve this specific problem. And I got so fearful of continuing the conversation that I really stopped it and basically said that our software could not be something that would resolve this issue, this specific issue for him. The fear overcame me so much that I had no courage to continue on. So I'd left the meeting. I went and talked to the CEO, who was my business partner, and she was more from a technical perspective, and she wanted to understand better what was going on and if we could solve the problem. So she had a very objective mind. She didn't feel like the deal was on the line, and she opened up the conversation with this person and really explored opportunities. And they ended up finding a path that worked. And it was so interesting to me because that fear inhibited my ability to think. Working for the startup really taught me a lot because getting the business was so important to the livelihood of our company. Think about that. If I didn't get deals, we faced not having a business anymore. And that meant that there were people that were depending on me. And I remember we got this whale of a client. I was so surprised. They were so excited to work with us. And I got so ahead of myself that in the meeting, not only did I agree to a pilot, but I talked about these add-ons that we could add to the contract. When I went back, I recognized when I was working with the software team that we had not baked in enough time in the number for all the additional things that I had promised. And because I was so embarrassed, like excitement and fear can have this shadow, this hangover that impedes us to be honest with the people around us that we made this mistake, because excitement is something that you don't want to inhibit. People like that. They like that you do that. But when you go above and beyond, they recognize that there's kind of like an imbalance. You got to be careful when your excitement gets unbalanced, that you're not mirroring the emotion in the room. But in this situation, when we went to renegotiate that deal, I was more humble. I had a better relationship with the client. And I said, we need to build in these things. And they were more than accommodating. And they said, oh, you should have told us before then. And I allowed that hangover, if you will, to impede my ability to renegotiate the terms that would be better for the business and would help us be a better partner to that client. I had never thought about it that way because the emotion didn't allow me in the moment and later on to think clearly. So as you're thinking about your negotiator mindset and you're identifying fear and excitement for you, I want you to think about fear shouldn't be a stop sign. Fear should be something that you pause and you think about, say yes before you're ready. And excitement, don't confuse generosity with value. When you get really excited, do the same. Add space before you move forward. So here's a tip. Is doing that check. Is it fear or excitement? And what are you going to do? For either one of those, you need to put some space in to either in the moment, take a breath, identify, and before you make a decision, decide what you want to do. For fear, it's getting yourself not to make a quick decision, a yes, no. Maybe it's asking a good question and saying, well, tell me more about the event. What will be a part of that? If you make that your automatic response to get curious when you face fear, that's one way to identify that self-check in the moment. For that excitement piece is to say, oh my gosh, they said yes, this is really exciting. I want to just take a breath and just keep in the same cadence as the other person. That can help you be real focused on the emotion that you're facing in that moment. I've been able to do this and I can feel it in my body. I can see that it's happening to me. And then I can almost feel it bubbling up to my mind. I'm very careful to give myself a moment. Identify that emotion for you so that you can make the choice about what you're going to do in those next moments. So for these next two tips, I'm going to give one around fear, and the third one will be around excitement. So for the fear, I want you to reframe fear as fuel. How can you see the situation where you identify you're apprehensive to move forward? You're inclined to say no. Start paying attention to and identify in your mind when somebody asks you to move forward with something, what's the narrative that automatically goes in? Is it these things that you say, oh, I don't have experience to do that. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability to do that well. Fear allows us to give us a reason why we can justify a quick no. So my great friend James always talks about, he made a default for himself in every situation to say yes before he's ready. And even if he said after an hour or two, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said yes to it. Even going back and saying, I said yes to this and I need some thinking through on this, or I need to get a coach, or going back and saying, can we shift it a little bit? I have this experience. I'm going to bring somebody else in. You can figure it out along the way, but say yes, and then identify, once you get into a rational mind, what you're going to do to allow yourself to move forward and be successful in that. And then the third tip is anchor your excitement with boundaries. Before you just say yes, what are the things that you can do to self-assess how far you want to go? When somebody says yes and it was unexpected, that just creates this bubbling up of immediate excitement in us. So how can you slow yourself down and even say to them, this is great. This is unexpected for me. I am so excited to work with you. I think this will be a great partnership. Something that is filler words for you to allow yourself to get your composure around that. Let's think about what we can do. And when you give, see what you can gain. When you are in an excited state of mind, what can you say to pause, to say, oh, that's great. In fact, I could do this. And then allow them to fill the space around that before you jump in with something else. Really look at how you're mirroring them. That is real around that excitement and how that can be overwhelming to some people because we are naturally our own emotional self. So to somebody else, the way we come across can feel just different than them. So be aware of those moments of having an overabundance of excitement and how that's affecting the other person. So the first tip is to identify when you're in that moment of fear or excitement. Be able to label it for yourself in that moment so you can decide what to do. The second tip is once you see fear, reframe it as fuel. How can you allow yourself to say yes so you don't say no, giving yourself some space to encourage yourself to have that courage and get curious. And then the third is be able to put some boundaries around your excitement. These are really tricky emotions because they feel the same. We believe we're making sound decisions because in the moments we believe they're logical. But as the research has proven to us today, so often our decisions are emotional. So identifying when fear and emotion or excitement are in your everyday, I want you to ask yourself this week, as you are an observer of yourself and you're building this evidence of when these come up for you, what decisions am I hesitating on because of fear? Maybe you hear yourself say no and you think, why did I do that? And then what decisions are you rushing into because you're excited? Maybe unexpectedly, or you just have so much built up emotion around it that you just want to move forward. So observe your decision making this week and think about what's driving my decisions. Is it logic or is it emotion? Think about that. 90% of our decisions in a professional environment are emotional. So when is that happening to you? And when can you get really clear? And when can you add space so that you can separate that immediate response to the decision that's going to give you the best possible outcome to get what you want? It's all about making that shift to a negotiator mindset. That's why I think it's so powerful, because when you naturally think like a negotiator, you take a moment to look around and go, interesting. Whether it's to you, you think, why did I immediately say that? Why am I thinking that? Or to the people around you, interesting. They don't seem apprehensive. Is that emotion? Is that fear? What's going on with them? So be an observer of what's going on around you and within you around fear and excitement. If you want to get more on this topic and others about deepening your shift to negotiator mindset, jump into negotiatorlove.com. That's where you can sign up for my newsletter where I tell stories and share more insights about making this shift. Because remember that negotiation is more than a skill. It truly is a mindset. Until next time, I'll see you then.